Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Param Ishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Tava Vedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste. So we begin today on the verse 42, the same objector. First he was talking about today, why this difference, why these new names, why you're talking about I and self, we want to understand this Mr. Kutastha. And then Vidyaranya says, don't worry, Kutastha means self, okay? So self is equal or synonymous to Kutastha and vice versa. I want to make it clear because, sometimes I say Kutastha because I got used to it. And Sylvia, you just take it to be self, okay? And the I is meant to be something other than I, you, he, and she. So there is plurality, but the self is one self. The I has plurality, and the I is not always present, as we have observed in the previous teachings. Now the I disappears in the state of deep sleep. The I is present in the awakening and in the dream, but absent. So those things we have seen in the verse 41. The 42, he says, self merely exclude the idea of others because it embraces everything. When we say self, it encompasses, it somehow it embraces everything. He, she, everything is the self, herself, himself, I, myself, and so on. The self, it's just embrace everything, but it does not say anything about Kutastha. So the guy is still a little bit disturbed and irritated with this thing of Kutastha. This exclusion of others in the self this is the reply of Vidyaranya. This exclusion of others is the self, meaning to say, is Kutastha. Kutastha is the self, is Chaitanya, is consciousness. So exclusion is in favor of our idea. So when we exclude plurality, when we exclude otherness, and we bring everything into the undual nature of the self, okay, this exclusion is in harmony with our teachings, okay, our philosophy. So the self with Kutastha is that which is the substratum of this, the first, second, and third person, okay? And then on the verse 43, he says, ordinarily. Let me just go through quickly a passage here. The objector says, the self is arrived by exclusion of the non-self. This is meaning of the self. Nowhere the meaning of Kutastha is given here. And how dare you to say that the self is Kutastha if you never really defined Kutastha? And then this is the question of the objector, the irritable objector at this point. Therefore, it does not mean Kutastha, and this is the opinion of the objector. So, and then Vidyaranya says, if you raise such a question, I'm so happy. I'm going to resolve this problem. The word self, Svayanka, which is another name for the self, excludes the everything which is plurality, which is the not self. If we exclude all the non-self, what is left is the self, which is Kutastha. And then he says, and here's the most relevant part here, the entire Stula, Sukshma, Shahira, the body-mind complex, okay? The subtle body and the physical body, the body-mind construct is not the self. And then it says, the Chidabhasa, you know, the body-mind complex, and then the Chidabhasa, which is reflect consciousness, is also not self. So now it's saying that the Chidabhasa is also not self. The Chidabhasa is not Kutastha. When all the bodies, all shahiras are negate, Chidabhasa also will be negated as not self. So this is a subtle understanding here, because the reflect consciousness, the chit abhasa, abhasa means reflection. Chit is consciousness, okay? So we have original consciousness, and then we have it reflect somehow or shining somehow in mithya. When it reflects as chidabhasa, it reflects within mithya, within in the scope of mithya, the power of maya. And it happens within consciousness, of course, but it's happening in this appearance superimposition on consciousness. So the entire body-mind complex is not self. And then it goes further to say the reflect consciousness also is not self. When all the bodies, the shahiras are negated, Chidabhasa also must be negated as not self. When Chidabhasa is gone, the first, second, and third person also will go. So we are negating the reflection of consciousness. A reflection of consciousness begins with aham, I, and then we see otherness. We see he, you, he, and she, and it as well, and the inert object. So when we negate the very reflection of consciousness, we have to negate anything and everything. And then those three persons, I, you, and he, and she, no? You, he, and she, they are negated as not self. Therefore, I, he, she is the not self. But the self appears in every sentence because we say you, yourself, I, myself, you know, and he, himself. No? That's why in deep sleep, the Chidabhasa go away. So this is another interesting point. That's why during deep sleep, all the I of the Chidabhasa and the Chidabhasa fundamentally is the aham, the I. So that's why in Sushupti or Sushupti, so you remember Sushupti? That's why in Sushupti, in deep sleep, the Chidabhasas go away. Even the aham goes away. Yeah? Everything is negated. What's left after we negate everything is original consciousness. And this original consciousness is changeless. It's non-dual. Chidabhasa will come and go, but chit, okay, consciousness, original consciousness, which is Kutastha, is that which is always ever present, never coming and going, and never modifying itself. If it is consciousness or Kutastha, which means Chaitanya only, and it's there even in deep sleep when the I notion is gone. So there is one thing that is there through all the three states. We know that, and every one of our texts brings this notion, especially the Mandukya. So we have through all the three states and other altered states, there is the light of consciousness in which all the states appear and disappear. Even in deep sleep, when the aham is gone, it's still Kutastha is there. The individuality, the I notion goes and remains there something. And that something is Kutastha. So again and again, Kutastha is just unchanging, akarta, limitless consciousness. In deep sleep, the self remains. The self is Kutastha. It remains not associated. It's asanga shaitanya, alone, without any association. So now the question is, in deep sleep, consciousness is not associated with anything. And then in awaking, in the awake state or the dream states, is consciousness, is Kutastha, associate with things or not? It's not really associate. It's everything is associated with consciousness, because everything, somehow exists due to the existence of Satchitananda, Brahman. Brahman does not associate to anything, but this mirage occurring within Brahman makes all these phenomenal objects, these aham and all the other three persons, and even it, the inert object, everything is definitely associated with consciousness, with Kutastha. More than associate, is dependent on Kutastha, and enjoys a certain apparent existence due to the existence of Kutastha, the only source of consciousness. Therefore, we must negate everything, including the Chidabhasa. So we're going to go a little bit deeper on this point. Why Chidabhasa, reflect consciousness from a certain angle, must be negated as the not self. You understand? Negation of everything. So in the verse 43, people ordinarily use self and Atman as synonymous. And so both terms are never used together. In fact, each of these terms exclude the idea of another. So both of these terms, self and Atman, which is the same thing, they are all inclusive. They somehow, they exclude everything, they include everything, and they are never used in terms of otherness. There is nothing than Atma or the self, which is all inclusive. Okay, so there is not much on this verse. The verse 44, the objector comes back and says, self merely excludes the idea of another and does not say anything about Kutastha. Again, he is really obsessed with this thing. The self is something that is enjoying a negative definition by something that excludes or rejects everything else, okay? But the self does not say anything about Kutastha. And then Vidyaranya say, this exclusion of others is the self of Kutastha. Kutastha is defined as one without a second. Okay, we say it's that which negates everything, that which is the only reality, but depending on the angle, we say that which includes or embraces everything, because everything is happening within the self, within Kutastha. Where am I? 44. Now I was repeating the other one. The doubt is, we often use such expression, the pot itself does not know. Hence, the word self is applied not only to I, you, he, and she, but it's also used to it, to inert objects. And then Vidyaranya replies saying, such language is used because Atma is the basis of the inanimate objects as well. So the reply here already is telling us that Kutastha or the self or Atma is contained within all the inert objects, okay? So therefore, we say itself, okay? The river flows by itself, you know? Gravity drops by itself, and so on. So here it begins it starts being a little interesting. He says that I'm willing to accept the self, and the self refers to Kutastha, Chaitanya, okay, consciousness, and that Kutastha, which is the self, pervades, okay, pervades the first, the second, and third person, because I say I, the self, you, the self, she, the self. But the word self is also used along with inert objects. We say the pot does not know by itself. The river flows by itself. Okay? Therefore, the word self is used along with inert objects also. Okay? So now the inquiry here is this self, you know, that includes the I, you, he, and she, you know. And then we can relate to that because we understand that aham is the self. It's not the self. It begins with aham. Now this reflect consciousness, and then this reflect consciousness is a sentient beings, being, and then the inert objects are absolutely insentient. And yet we say itself. So itself indicates that the self is contained in everything which is inert, okay? The glass and everything. So the self is contained. If the self is contained, it means to say Chit is also contained, okay? Sat is also contained. Often we say that we can know that the self is contained in everything, including something like this, because we experience the existence of something here, okay? So, but the fact is that there is Chit in here as well, okay? And we're gonna look into it a little bit more in details. And then it goes on to say, if you say that the word self means Kutastha, then consciousness must pervade also the object, the inert objects, okay? If you say that the self, which is synonymous with Kutastha, which synonymous with consciousness, pervades everything, the entire universe, okay? Then it must pervade the inert object. Because Kutastha, Chaitanya, pervades the human being, human beings are sentient. And if Kutastha Chaitanya pervades the rivers, then the rivers must become sentient too. We don't see the rivers and other objects, inert objects, demonstrating sentience. So there is something wrong with your approach, with your philosophy, says the inquirer, the objector. The pot itself does not know anything, although we may use the word pot itself. The self is contained. Therefore, if we object that the word self does not imply the self, how will you answer this doubt? So if we put an objection on the word self, Sabayan, if we object that the word Sabayan does not imply the self, so then this word does not imply really the self as we know the self, shining as a sentience, you know? So how are you going to resolve this problem? You know, you say that the self is contained in the inert objects, but we don't see the sentience in these objects. Vidyaranya gives the answer. Let us be clear that Kutastha Chaitanya pervades all the entire universe, including the inert object. It is there in the desk, you know, in the mic, in the telephone, in all physical objects. It's there in everything. The expression self goes with inert objects also because Kutastha Chaitanya is present in inert object as well. Then the next question is, if insentient objects is also pervade, if insentient inert objects are also pervaded by consciousness, and sentient objects are also pervaded by consciousness, how come one is sentient and the other is insentient? So this is the bottom line, okay? So if insentient objects are also pervaded by consciousness, and if sentient objects, living beings, are pervaded by consciousness, how come insentient objects are not sentient? How come one is sentient and the other is not sentient? So we have, I believe we have approached this question several times in the past in our class, here and there. And usually we say like, because certain objects do not have the subtle body. Some other objects have a subtle body. So we're going to look into it in a little bit more depth here. It's not, verse 45, it's not the immutable consciousness or self or Atman which makes the difference between animate and inanimate. So inanimate object is more than a sentient object, okay? A lot of sentient beings, they almost do not have any animation. But when you say that there is an animate object, it includes that it's sentient as well. So it somehow it responds to the environment around itself. So there is a difference between objects that are alive, or respond to its environment, and the ones that are totally inert, like a stone. And it's said that it's not the consciousness or the Atman that makes one sentient and the others inert, okay? Makes one animate and the other inanimate. It is the Jiva, the reflection of consciousness in the intellect, which makes objects sentient. So now it's saying that, so it's not that consciousness makes certain objects sentient, because since consciousness pervades all objects, and then all objects should be sentient. It's not consciousness, and it's not the bodies, because we have seen in the previous verse, it's not the subtle body, it's not. What is making certain objects sentient and animate? And then says, it is the Jiva, okay? And the Jiva is what? It's a living creature, a creature that responds to the stimulus of the environment. In other words, it's reflected consciousness. The Chidabhasa is the reflected consciousness which produce the sentience. Produce sentience to what? To the physical body, of course. The physical body becomes alive, becomes animate, it becomes sentient due to what? It's not due to the subtle body, as we often say. It's due to the Chidabhasa, reflect consciousness, RC. RC has the power to do what? To make the physical body alive, to make the physical body a sentient being, and in many instances animate, doing all kinds of things, and in some other instance having an intellect and so on. Reflected consciousness.
So Arlindo, are we saying here that it's Chidabhasa is really the only thing that creates division? So that
of course,
that it's totally a human construct There
Yeah.
is, yeah, it's lovely.
Well,
This is a great verse.
yeah, from the standpoint of Ishvara,
Yeah,
from the standpoint of Ishvara, I would say that that Maya creates infinite numbers of configurations or of namarupas, you understand? And that immediately it projects plurality, diversity, and separations and divisions. But then when the human intellect, which is the Shidabhasa, comes into play, and then it's going to witness distinction, division, separation, duality, plurality. And then it is actualized. The projection of plurality is actualized by the Chidabhasa when it is the human Chidabhasa. Although I guess the others, other creatures as well, my chicken, they know when there are some dangerous other creatures around, you understand?
So you need an experiencer for division.
We need for division, effective actual division, we need the Jivas, not only and it's more clearly apprehended in the human mind, of course. So the bottom line is the Kutastha is not responsible for sentience. Let me see. Because Kutastha Chaitanya has to be responsible, it's so because if Kutastha Chaitanya, if consciousness was responsible for sentience, and then Chaitanya would become a limited entity because it's all pervading, but yet it cannot, it would create divisions, you understand, between insentient, inert, and sentient. In other words, if consciousness would be defined as sentience and insentience, and then consciousness would be limited, okay, and would be creating division between inert and sentient objects. So for dividing, you should look for a feature which will be there in a certain area, okay? So you need a different feature that's going to produce these divisions, these separations, okay? Dividing the world, dividing reality, is apparent reality, creating namarupas. In short, there is nothing which is not pervaded by Kutastha Chaitanya. Everything is pervaded by consciousness. But Kutastha is not responsible for sentience. If consciousness was responsible for sentience, then everything would be sentient, including this microphone. And then it says, a mirror cannot illumine the room. So, too, prana cannot do it, and the mind cannot limit the room either. The original consciousness cannot make the room, the body sentient. Reflecting medium cannot make the body sentient. What is going to make the room illumine? Okay, is reflected consciousness. No, in analogy here, electricity cannot do that, but electricity is going to shine on a bulb, filament of a bulb, and then can illuminate the room. So, and then going back to the body-mind complex, prana as well cannot illumine the mind, cannot really shine as sentience. Pranas are just there as a supporting system, okay? So there is something that is going to enliven the body and create sentience, and that is Chidabhasa. Then the reflected consciousness is there, and only the reflected consciousness, Chidabhasa, is responsible for create sentiency in all living creatures. Wherever there is reflected consciousness, there will be sentience, okay? Or that will be sentient. it is Chidabhasa that gives sentience to all objects. When the reflect consciousness is not there, or when the reflect consciousness goes, in the case of a body, of death of the body, when the body is no longer being sustained by the prana is a supporting system to support the body, so that this body-mind complex is producing sentience. But somehow the body fades, and then there is no reflected consciousness anymore producing sentience in the body, and the body begins deteriorating. This sentience in sentience division is caused by reflected consciousness, or the reflected consciousness, okay? So this reflect consciousness is what makes certain objects sentient. So which is slightly different from the concept that the subtle body is what pervades the physical body, and we know that is a fact, and the subtle body is going to make the subtle body, the physical body sentient. No, it's not the subtle body, it's something that happens within the subtle body, okay, or the body-mind construct, or between the causal body and subtle body. There is a certain reflection that occurs in some states and somehow fades on in the deep sleep state, but comes back again. So this reflection of original limitless consciousness on the body-mind complex is what's creating sentience. So Chidabhasa is what creates the buddhi. And here he says that the reflecting medium known as the buddhi, the reflecting medium known as the mind, that sometimes we hear that the subtle body is referred as the mind. Okay, so there is this subtle body, which is often said to be the mind, and it's often said to be the reflecting apparatus or medium. And on this mirror-like medium, there is a reflection. This reflection is Chidabhasa, is the Chidabhasa that is caused. It depends on the reflecting medium, and reflecting medium is also known as the mind. The division is caused by Chidabhasa, and Chidabhasa is caused by the reflecting medium. So the Chidabhasa, now we have a very strange relationship between the reflected consciousness and the reflecting medium, okay? So the reflecting medium must be there so that we have the aham, the Chidabhasa. So, and then this Chidabhasa is there. It's going to cause sentience and animation to the physical body, but it is dependable. It's caused by the mind reflecting medium. Without the reflecting medium, there is no aham. So whatever reflecting medium is there, the Chidabhasa will appear, okay, making that body a sentient body, okay? So that Chidabhasa will appear, and then it's going to go into deep sleep. It's going to be there potentially, the Chidabhasa, but it does not shine due to excess of tamoguna. Tamoguna is going to somehow dominate the mind, the buddhi, and then there is absorption of original limitless consciousness, and then aham does not come into play, but it comes back, and then again the physical body appears to be sentient. This Chidabhasa is also referred to as the ego. This is another twist, okay? This Chidabhasa, going on the continuation of this Shloka 45, this Chidabhasa is also called the ego. It's called the ahamkara, or it's called the jiva. And before it was called, no, the buddhi was called the reflecting medium. So this Chidabhasa, the reflect consciousness, is called the ego, the ahamkara, or the jiva. Kutastha is otherwise called Atma, or the self. This mix up, okay, between what? Between Chidabhasa, which is also called the ego, and Kutastha is the main purpose of these teachings of Vidyaranya, to try to help us to understand how these two get mixed together, how this superimposition mix them together in such a way that we can't really separate them objectively or literally, but in our understanding. So this Chidabhasa is called the ego, Ahamkara, or the ego. Kutastha is the self, is consciousness. There is a mix-up between what? The ego, the Ahamkara, and Kutastha, consciousness. And that is because of ignorance. We are not aware of this ignorance. And therefore, there is a confusion between Kutastha and Ahamkara. So now we are coming back to the subtle discrimination between consciousness, Kutastha, and the Ahamkara. And then jumping a little bit here, we say that in the same page, Chidabhasa is not chit. So chit is consciousness, okay? Chit is the conscious aspect of Brahman. Sat is the existence aspect of Brahman. Ananda is the limitless nature of Brahman. Chidabhasa is not chit, okay? It is not independent, it's not limitless, it's just a pale reflection of the limitless nature of consciousness, which is akarta and the bhokta, does not do anything and does not change. The Chidabhasa change. Yeah? The Chidabhasa is dependent on what? On the reflecting medium. Yeah? Therefore, we can never say that Chidabhasa is chit, is Brahman. Okay? Chidabhasa is Chidabhasa. Okay? Which presents us with, again, apparent contradictions within the teaching. You understand? How can we say that Aham Brahmasmi or Tat Vamasi? I am that limitless Brahman, if this I am is the Chidabhasa. So naturally, the question comes up, if I, you, and he all refer to reflected consciousness, then for this consciousness, which word we will use? We can use I, you, and he because they refer to different people, different locations and divisions. Kutastha, Chaitanya does not have plurality, division, location. Vidyaranya established then that the word self is the ideal word to denote Kutastha, okay? So again, he said Kutastha must be defined by the word self, okay? So, which is not the Chidabhasa, okay? So, the Chidabhasa is the ego, right? The Chidabhasa is the Ahamkara. So we are still now the text is going to go a little bit into the meaning of words and so on. Vidyaranya argues that the word self goes happily with all the three persons. We say the water flows by itself, which means that the word self is in association with water, and water is inert. Before he says it goes with the three persons. The self is therefore an ideal name for Kutastha. The objector makes an argument and asks a question if the word self can be used within these three persons. So how about with the inert objects? So is the self also used within for inert object? And then Vidyaranya says the water, and then he says, because generally speaking, we say that inert objects exist, flows by itself and so on. Since the word self goes with inert objects, the consciousness goes with the inert objects as well. For that, Vidyaranya says, I knew you were going to ask that question. Therefore, I was waiting, excited to give you this answer. The sentient objects have got two consciousness, you would imagine, whereas the insentient objects have one consciousness. So the insentient object, the person will think like, okay, the sentient objects have got two consciousness, okay, the human consciousness, let's say, and the limitless Brahman consciousness. While the insentient object has one consciousness. What is the consciousness? It's Brahman's consciousness. No? So how do you talk of two consciousness conveniently being unadvited all the time? So the object is present really, you know. Oh no, this is Vidyaranya presenting to the guy, unfolding better his question maybe. He say, how do you talk of two consciousness conveniently being inviting all the time? For this, Vidyaranya says that one is Kutastha Chaitanya, consciousness, and another is reflected consciousness, okay? Chidabhasa, which is Mithya, which is Vyavaharika Satyam, okay? One is Mithya, one is a projection of Maheshwara, is a reflection that occurs within the micro medium called the body-mind complex of the individual soul. In all sentient beings, there is consciousness, reflected consciousness, Kutastha Chaitanya. When we discover the reality of that will not be counted, okay. Then the object also asks, how come sentient things have additional consciousness, which is the reflect consciousness? Okay, we have seen some teaching that says we are a mixture of several factors, but fundamentally we are a mixture of original consciousness and reflected consciousness. And we have seen that from different angles, in which way we are a mixture of both, okay, including on this verse of Panchadasi. So we have these two consciousness. One is there providing Maya with everything it needs to create all these objects in the universe. And then Maya says, and now I need objects not to be all the time like storms. I need some objects with sentience and animation to have some fun here, you know. What is the purpose of creating a world that nothing moves, nothing does, nothing sinks, you know, nothing makes a mistake? So, and then he brings about these objects that reflects consciousness, okay? And then this reflect consciousness is going to be the second factor, and this reflect consciousness is going to produce animation and sentience to these objects, okay? Certain objects are going to be a mixture of original consciousness and reflect consciousness, and we are a fair example of such creatures, you know? So in the insentient world of objects, you know, this reflect consciousness is denied. Swamiji says the human being, the animals, the plants, all of them have reflect consciousness. We know that. They have a reflection consciousness, and then it means they have a reflecting medium. It must be there. The appropriate, and it's fair to mention that some of these reflecting mediums are going to produce sentience, but not necessarily are going to produce intelligence or intellect, you know, the free will or the ability to think and determine and discern, okay? So certain objects, the so-called human beings, now we have this reflecting medium that somehow produce intelligence, you know, as we say, which is a sentience. I am, and I know that I am, and I want to understand what's going on. My chickens, they do not think their way from my observation, you know. So the appropriate reflecting medium is Sukshma Karana Shahira, mixture. So now he's saying that the reflecting medium is a mixture of causal and subtle bodies. Okay, it's the first time I see him presenting that way. He says that the appropriate reflecting medium is something like causal body, subtle body combined, mixed together. Okay, we have the causal body and then there is a program for all beings, the sentient beings and the inert beings. They are programmed in the causal body, and then there is a subtle body, and then the combination of this causal body and subtle body is going to produce the reflecting medium. Okay, we generally don't mention, and then Swamiji says, we don't mention the causal body, but that must be understood. The causal body is causing the subtle body. The subtle body is backed up by the causal body, okay? But fundamentally, it's the subtle body that is going to produce the reflected consciousness, okay? The reflect consciousness is going to do what? It's going to be making alive and animate and sentient the physical body. And then this object called the body-mind construct seems to be a sentient being. Wherever the Sukshma Shahira, the mind, is there, the subtle body is there, there will be a reflection of consciousness. In all inert objects, mind is not there. So in all inert objects, the subtle body is not there, therefore there are no reflections. In a human dead body, the subtle body is also not there. Okay, why? It goes away. Subtle bodies, they don't like dead bodies. The moment the pranas are not there, subtle body says, please, let me get out of here, And then there is still some aham there. The aham is going to say, no, I'm so attached to this old body. Let's stay a little longer. And the subtle body wants to get the hell out of there, And then there are people in the room say, please don't leave us, and the subtle body is all confused. Oh my God, what a mess here. So no, but they want to go. As soon as the body is dying, they want to go. In all inert objects, mind is not there. In a dead body, there is no subtle body pervading the physical body anymore. Kutastha Chaitanya is everywhere, as we know. Consciousness is everywhere. But Chidabhasa, Chaitanya, reflect consciousness, is only there where the mind is. It's only there where the reflected consciousness is. It's only there where there is a reflection of consciousness, and then what's happening? And then Chidabhasa is going to be there. So what is going to determine this? What the division between inert and sentient beings is this reflected consciousness to produce a sort of a mind. And that could bring us to the question, so do the plants have a mind? Mark, you deal so much with plants. Do the plants have a mind?
I believe plants don't have an individual mind. They have a collective mind in the form of a Jiva. Yeah. So yes, they do. If you know what I mean, they have a hive mind, so to speak.
Yeah.
From every species has its own hive mind in the form of a Jiva. I believe that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here, going through this, we say that reflected consciousness is also called the mind, and there is a sentience. The sentience is produced by reflect consciousness. So this consciousness must have a rudimentary mind, but there is a certain mind there. I see in some animals the mind is there. Okay, even the personalities are different.
Yeah. The plants don't have a sense of individuality, is what I'm trying to say. So there's one mind kind of overseeing all of them.
I got that. That's a good concept. Very nice.
And yet plants do have individual stimulus response situations.
Yeah. But that's the same programming.
Environments.
Yeah.
Under the same program as Mark is pointing out. So they know how to behave according to their species,
And to the environments they're in,
Okay, the difference between sentient is not caused by Kutastha. The difference between sentient is caused by Chidabhasa. We have seen this. Okay, we go now to the next page. There is a little passage here when Swamiji says, the clip is means the isness or existence or sat nature of Brahman is born from Kutastha. So now when you say Kutastha, Kutastha is not only chit, but it's sat as well, because the clips means the isness, the existence is borrowed from consciousness. That's why in the end, conscious existence are two names for the same principle. The Chidabhasa is when you say that isness is also borrowed from Kutastha. So when consciousness borrows its existence to something else, that something else is going to contain the same sat nature, existence nature, isness nature, which is borrowed from or lent by consciousness, by Brahman. Sentience means Chidabhasa, which makes the body sentient, reflect medium, and reflect consciousness. Both of them are superimposed on Kutastha. So this is nice. Okay, so it is Chidabhasa, which makes the body alive, sentient, and animate, reflect consciousness. The body reflecting medium and the reflected consciousness, both, okay? The aham and the reflecting medium, the reflect consciousness and the reflect consciousness and reflected consciousness, reflecting medium and reflect consciousness. Both of them are superimposition on consciousness. So we have now the aham, we have the reflecting medium, which is technically described as the subtle body. Subtle body is going to produce aham, and then we have these things, but both of these things are mithya. They are superimposed on Kutastha, on consciousness. Both the body and the reflect consciousness, both of them are superimpositions on consciousness. Not only the body, but also reflect consciousness, and also the achetana, also the insentient apparatus, medium, not only the body, Chidabhasa and the reflecting medium, both are superimposed on consciousness. The clip does not come under the reflected consciousness, does not come under the reflect consciousness category, and hence we separate and we enumerate the clip as in the inert category. Okay, so that is the bottom line here. And then in the second verse, slokan is just a passage in which he says that just as the conscious jiva is created by illusion, illusion based on consciousness, even so on it, the inanimate, inert objects are created by avidya. Okay, so this is the verse 46. Whether the word self can be used for consciousness or not is the question. This has nothing to do with Vedanta. So now it's several verses here I'm going to skip because it's more like a discussion, debate on which word we should use for this or for that. Okay, and then Swamiji Vidyaranya was trying to put an end to all of that. He said whether the word self is the best word to be used for Kutastha or not. Is the question, but it has nothing to do with Vedanta. Because of the change of name, nothing is going to happen to your Vedanta. It's still Vidyaranya. This is Swamiji unfolding. It's still Vidyaranya want to defend his stand. Why I use this name Kutastha? The word self goes along with first, second, third persons, and then everything. So in Chandogya, and then Swami brings also another supporting logic, say that Chandogya, Narada goes to Guru and introduces himself as a great scholar. So this Narada gives a big introduction of himself regarding his qualifications. And then he says, that I, such a qualified person, I am. The above described I and the word that goes with the first person. Similarly, so and then he goes into discussions and parallels like that for the next few verses that we're gonna jump because it's a little bit boring. So in the page 446, even the word I has to be negated. This is a nice passage. When we negate everything, we need to negate the aham. Okay? We need to negate this very reflection of consciousness when it manifests itself as I am. So is this I am the ultimate reality? Even before we put name and attributes to this I am, does this I needs to be negated? So Vidyaranya and Swamiji says that even the word I needs to be negated. How can I know the self then? When I goes, you will know the self. So Swamiji said, well, you have to negate. And how can I know the self? When the I goes, I will know the self. The very I, the knower principle, the aham, yeah, has to be negated. So this is a very nice point here. We don't have much time to go into it, but we can come back next week. Then one must ask, if I negate the I, the knower principle, can I know anything? Can I know the self if I negate the knowing principle, the knowingness, the aham, the one that can know, the experience knowing entity? If I negate that, can I know the self? Yeah? If I can know the self, again, the knower principle, the I that should be negated, will be retained. And therefore, we say that there is no question of knowing the self, because the very question is illogical, because to know the self, the aham must be there, and the aham is an experienced entity that needs to be negated. Therefore, you can never know the self. Knowing the self means retaining the ahamkara, the knower. And retain the knower is not negating the reflected consciousness. Okay, so we go into that next week, and we can have some fun with this point. Okay.
Which verse was that, Arlinda?
This is verse 50.
50. Thank you.
50. I'm going to keep reading a little bit. I read until verse 54, and I saw certain things that are worth just passing briefly like that. And then up to which verse Ramji says that Ramji has skipped, verse 80 something.
I think he says all the way up to 129.
129. Okay. But anyhow, if we go back to the inquiry into existence, from this chapter 6 on, there is almost nothing except the verse. And then if we have only the verse, we're gonna be led to my interpretation alone. And I'm not an expert in a text like that, as Vidyaranya, of course, as Swami Paramarthananda. So I would rather read the material and select some nice extracts, and then we play with it, because otherwise we could just terminate the inquiry into existence, because there is almost nothing there anymore. Okay? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishate. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, my friend. Sorry for my delay today. I will see what I'm going to do to resolve this problem. Namaste. We meet again next Thursday, Ishwara willing. Bye now.
Thanks, Alan. Bye now.